Hi, I'm Tina Jefferson. I'm the Regional Administrator for Region 6 Department of Children and Families. I'm here to introduce the video portion of our training program, Racial Justice Everything. The racial justice work at the Department of Children and Families really started in 2011 under the leadership of Commissioner Katz. Under her leadership, racial justice became one of 7 cross-cutting themes, and in 2013, she sent a statewide memorandum out declaring our agency a racial justice organization. The goal of the video you're about to see will be to give you real-life examples of how some of our staff have learned how to do this work through a racial justice lens. This work is truly a journey for everyone. It's individualized for each person, so hopefully you'll get something great out of seeing real-life examples. We hope that these stories inspire you and serve as an example of how our racial justice work is essential to assessments.
Most recently, I became involved working with a family of African American descent and 2 very young parents. We became involved with them due to concerns that we needed to help them address some needs. During one of my visits with the family made a comment to me indicating that they felt that I was racially profiling them due to the color of their skin. At that moment, I had to take a step back because I didn't know how to answer that question. And it made me upset, and it hurt me at that home visit. So what I did was I answered his question in terms of, I'm here to help you address your needs. And I kind of just ended it at that time because I didn't know how else to continue on that conversation. So I left that visit that day and I returned back to my office, and my manager was there at the time. So I remember going into her office and saying to her I needed to talk to her about something that had just happened. And she clearly knew that I was upset about something. So I explained to her what had happened, and she was able to process with me why that family may have felt that way about me. How could I have handled it at that given moment? So what I did in return was I took that feedback, and during my next visit, I was able to address that question to that family because I felt at my initial visit, I just never addressed it. I just kind of ended it. And I felt in working with them and engaging with them that I needed to really focus on explaining to them that the reason why I was there was to help them, not because of the color of their skin. That experience has taught me to be more open and comfortable in talking about race and culture. It has taught me that we have support in all levels here at the department, from management to supervisors. It's made me be a better worker. It's made me become aware of who I am and what my biases are. I would tell my peers, my coworkers, my supervisor, manager that you kind of really need to know your own cultural biases so that we could better work with our families. And pretty much don't be afraid to talk about race and culture, because the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you will be in embracing it in the work we do here at the department.
Around 2007, while I was working in intake in New Haven, I received a case with regards to our Somalian family. The allegations were a 4-year-old had answered the door, and again, this is in the town of New Haven, and also that the home was messy. In working with the family, come to find out they had some health issues, and that the parents were understand that New Haven's not safe and that the 4-year-old should not answer the door. And the home did not rise to the level of any type of, safety or issues against the children. I'd spoke to the immigration agency and I wanted to learn about, where this family had come from because, quite frankly, I didn't ask those questions through the interpreter. And to find out this, they came from a Kenyan refugee camp, and I really didn't know much about those camps. And I learned that, usually the buildings are housed with maybe 10 or 20, people. There's lack of clothing. There's really not too much food. And, going to the bathroom might be digging a hole in the ground. So that gave me an understanding like, okay, wow, there's a lot of hardships out there that, I don't know about. With me growing up in, the town of Berlin, Connecticut, very, urban and actually, very white town. I grew up with a handful of, minority children and, I figured, hey, I'm gonna treat them, the same respectfully and all that and, maybe not see race. And though I met it from a respectful standpoint, what I missed the boat was the education or what it felt to be like, walking in their shoes. How does it feel being a youth, African-American youth, growing up in a white community? How did it feel to be the African-American family growing up in the white, community? Maybe on the outside, they lived in the same home like me, but, how did their, living in this community, what kind of effects they have them? Did they face any racism? That because I didn't see it doesn't mean that they didn't live it. So, in working with this family and from my own experiences, realizing that how narrow-sighted I was, I gained insight into what the background on how the family, came to where they are today, and how they grew up, and some of the, how they make the decisions based on their culture and their experiences.
I had this experience. I had transferred to this office and I received a case from investigations, and I was reading the protocol from the investigations worker about the allegations surrounding the case. It was a substance abuse case, significant substance abuse, and it was a Latino family. It was a Latino mother specifically. And me being Latina myself, I further realized that she was identifying herself as Muslim, and I found that very ironic at the time, because on a personal level, my significant other was of Moroccan descent, and he was a Muslim, and I knew that in their beliefs they didn't condone any type of substance abuse. So I contacted her. I scheduled my first home visit to introduce myself as her DCF social worker, and she allowed me, went out to the home, she allowed me inside, and it was then that I realized in speaking to her that her situation was different, that I had come in with my preconceived notions of what Muslims were, what Latinos should be, based on my own personal experience, and I didn't realize her true story. Upon further elaboration, when speaking to her, she really kind of talked about her experience struggling with substance abuse, and that she had turned to Islam, hoping to guide her in her faith. And I walked out of that home visit really coming to terms with all the things that I thought I knew, and how I was so wrong in judging her, and that I wanted my personal story to be her story, and that I really needed to respect her narrative. And that was truly an aha moment for me, to really come to terms that I have my own biases and that I really needed to put them aside so that I can, in the best interest of the family, support them.
I was developing a pattern of complaints from individuals of Latino descent. And these are the people that I grew up with. I have many friends from this culture. But I've had to take a step back and look at that. Like, it was such a distinct category of just a specific ethnic group who felt that I didn't treat them right. So, in thinking about that, I really had to say, do I go into their homes feeling as if I know exactly who they are? And if that's what I'm doing, then that's a disservice to them. And in trying to process that, it has been more of like, just looking at the complaint And I've had to explain, well, this is what happened and this is what I said. And it was an environment where it was safe to say, well, maybe I was wrong. And, you know, I haven't had anyone to say, like, well, maybe there's some implicit bias going on. Like, let's talk about that. So, just in my own ruminations, thinking about it and saying, maybe I do go in with preconceived notions because I feel like I know who they are as a people. And I've had to really think about, you know, everyone from that descent does not have the same way of life. And despite what I've read, I don't know the story. So I had to think about, you know, do I get offended when they lie to me? Do I automatically maybe not believe what they've said? Do I have a different expectation for them in the same circumstances as I would for another family of a different nationality? You know, just having to think about those things. And I've even had times where I felt like, well, maybe it's them, their bias against me as an African American woman. But it's just my job to make sure that I'm not doing it to them. So, with that being said, what I would like to say to my coworkers is that, like I said, despite what we've read, we don't know the whole story. And despite who we've come into contact with or what we've seen on the news or what we believe, we have to take a step back when people are complaining and not jump on the defense and say, okay, what is my role in this? And try to adjust the way that we work with this group, because the pattern is real.
My aha moment came at a staff meeting. It was a pretty benign staff meeting. We had an affirmative action manager come and was just doing a presentation on the recent hires of managers throughout the state with regards to what their gender was, what their race was. And somebody at the meeting stated, well, we need to hire more managers of color. We have a disproportionality problem here in this state, and if we had more managers of color, that could help alleviate the problem. Everybody agreed with her. I mean, it was, you know, it's an important issue, except that I said to myself, well, I'm a manager. I'm a Latino manager, a person of color, and the management staff in that office at the time were predominantly of color, Latinos and African Americans. So it was at that moment I realized, you know, I've contributed myself to this problem. I instantly thought of this old quote, we have met the enemy and he is us. It's funny because I was very proud of working and being promoted in the Hartford office, the community that I grew up in, and I thought as a Latino manager, you know, working with the people that, you know, I grew up with and the community that I grew up with, that I would make a difference. And to really start, you know, taking stock of just my own cultural biases and that maybe I was unaware of, you know, at the time, it was eye-opening, but it definitely changed every case decision that I made after that. I took what I thought, or I reflected as to what are my cultural biases at the time. And since then, every case that I've had as a manager, any case that I consulted on, I try to apply my own racial justice lens. And when we're working with this family, is this issue a poverty issue? Is it just the way they were brought up? Is it culturally how they see parenting? And do we then need to either readjust our understanding and meet them where they are? It should guide the services that we provide this family, having that first understanding about whether or not this is actually abuse and neglect or a cultural misunderstanding of how parenting takes place here.
My experience was I witnessed two people who were talking in their native language one day, and there was a third party also there, and I guess she just had zero tolerance on this day, and she said that she was just tired of hearing them talk in their language. all of a sudden, when she said this out loud, the two people that were talking in their native language, they just got really quiet. And I felt really hurt because I watched the whole situation and I had empathy for them. And I said to myself, my gosh, this same person who's made this outburst, she talks in her native language every day. So what's the difference? So the two people that were talking in their native language, they carried on with their conversation, but they carried on in English. So, I let it play out a little bit. I waited a few minutes, and then I went over to the person that made the outburst, and I said to her, hey, was that fair? What you just said? You talk in your native language all the time. What's the difference? What you just said to them. And so she didn't say anything, and I just walked away, and, I left it like that, and I went and sat down, and I started to think some things over, even about my own cultural bias, because there have been situations where I will overhear someone talking in their native language, and I would say, well, I wouldn't make an outburst, but I would say to myself, oh, gosh, again? So, I just think that we have to be aware of what we say around people or how we say things to people, and care about our peers, as well as, when you're going out to work with families, be conscious of how you think, or even be educated on different backgrounds. So just be aware of, when you're going out, don't go off of something you've seen on TV or someone you may have grown up with, or what you've heard people say from he say, she say, gossiping. Find out, and just don't judge people off of that, because judgment can wait.
I've had a lot of different experiences with the department and worked in several different offices, but my aha moment really came when I began working in the Hartford office. The Hartford office is primarily made up of people of color, and there are a handful of white people that work in that office. And what I began to see and understand is that because the majority of folks working in that office are people of color, that it's a different culture. I mean, we do the same DCF things and similarly in the same way, but really the folks of color really helped me to develop a better understanding of what it was like to be a person of color. And the one particular moment that I recall, my aha moment, was when the office director and I were talking, and I was talking about not seeing color, being colorblind, and making my decisions not based on somebody's race or based on somebody's race. So what happened is we started to talk about not knowing people's race versus understanding people's race and where they've come from and their experiences and how they've come through the world. And that it was at that point that I realized how important, it wasn't just important to know people's history, but also to know their race, because as a result of race, they've experienced things differently. So you can have a person, a white family, a Caucasian family, and a family of color, and they can be in the same situation. But if you weren't considering race, then you'd think everything was the same and equal. But when you consider race, you understand more in depth what the family of color has been through and the social implications of that on their wealth, where they live, and their status in society. So that was my aha moment. I thought being colorblind was the right thing to do. I thought somehow that I was doing the right thing. What I realized is that when I was doing that, I was not recognizing people's differences, recognizing their different life experiences, And by shutting that off, I really didn't have a good understanding of the family. And it winds up doing the exact opposite of what I really wanted to do, which was understand the family, understand their experiences. And not everybody is on the same playing field. Even if they might be in similar situations, they might have gotten to that place in a different way. And I think understanding that is really critical to helping our families and understanding what their needs are. And when you don't see that, when you are colorblind and you can't recognize those differences, that's when you wind up hurting families rather than helping families.
The call to action is to simply remember our racial justice group agreements. And some of those are: be brave, be honest, be kind, trust yourself, and trust others. And remember, you never have to do this work alone. There are several resources available to help you. Thanks for watching.